Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. I hope you've had a wonderful day, morning, afternoon, evening. We are here today on SaraSessions to talk to Jean-Sebastien Dufresne, founder of Ici et Là, Histoire de Vie, and a professional of all sorts. I will let him explore his titles if need be. We are here to have a wonderful little conversation about why you've been doing this. So let me ask you, who are you?
Good question.
Can we start with that?
Sure. Well, thank you, first of all, Sarah, for inviting me here today. It's really an honor for me to be part of that series. I would say that I would define myself as a curious, lifelong learner. That is always seeking to better understand and rethink how we individually and collectively adapt to this ever-changing, complex world in which we live in. So how we interact between each other, how we make decisions also. So I've worked for the past years on various topics, but always related to how we connect as humans and how we move forward, as groups, as a collectivity. So you mentioned the organization Ici et Là that I founded almost 20 years ago. So it's been a while. I've been around for a while. And its mission is to promote a more inclusive society through intercultural education. So to create spaces where people can interact, can share what they learn about each other in safe spaces where we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. We allow ourselves also to seek what is our true identity. Because I think it's important to better know who we are if we want to share it with someone else and to interact and to learn from someone else. So that organization has been around for, like I said, 20 years, working with youth, with adults also, but always seeking to create these spaces that I think are so important where we can learn from each other and grow together. And also, like you mentioned, I've went through a master's degree in intercultural mediation, actually. So I'm a mediator also by training, and I'm currently doing a master's in human systems intervention at Concordia, and a doctorate in law at University of Sherbrooke. So studying governance, actually, because I believe that. That we have as a people, there's different ways that we found to give ourselves norms. So there is, the formal way, I would say, that is like the lawmakers, politicians that would vote on laws. You have also the judges who are making decisions that after are being used to create norm, and you have sometimes experts that will come up with ideas and theories that also are used to create norms. But nowadays, what we see is that civil society also creates its own norms. So you have groups of people that decide together about how we should give ourselves rules, either in small groups and organizations and collectivities. So I'm interested also in how this way of giving ourselves norms can maybe be a better way to address complex issues where politicians fail. Like when we talk about climate change, and we're wondering why is it that it's so complicated to get politicians to take concrete actions on that? And there are some explanations. I've worked for many years also on electoral reform, so I know that there is there is an issue with our systems of how the power is given to the decision makers. So maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I think that there is something that we've seen for the past years that there is some power coming from civil society of giving ourselves some norms, and I'm interested in seeing how we can better address those complex issues by having collectivities and groups of people taking and addressing these issues together.
How fascinating. How fascinating. Were you always such a social science fanatic to go and look into how these interconnections and these dynamics evolve? Or how did you start in all of this? How did you know one day to go towards this? What called you?
Yeah, I think we all need an experience that we live and we go through, and then we have some sort of an awakening, because I think that we live in a society that tries to tell us that there is stability, that there is comfort, and there is so many distractions around that we have, so that we don't necessarily pay that much attention to issues and to societal issues and complex issues that are affecting our world. And I think that through some experience, and one specific one that I lived when I went for the first time in Mali, in West Africa, in 2002, I spent a few months there and just experiencing a reality that was totally different than mine, from here, because I'm originally from Quebec, from Sept-Îles, the north coast of Quebec. So to go in a really remote place and to experience that, at the time, it was not that common. Nowadays you have more youth traveling around. It's more common that people, would want to go and experience things. But at the time, it was not that common. And I think that this really allowed me to realize that there was a really big value in connecting with people that see the world in a different way, and to re-question our own perception of the world. And I think that this part of re-questioning who we are, and wondering, who am I really, who I want to be, and seeing that what I've been told that I am, and what I've thought that I am for so many years can be different, and just this little realization, this little awakening is really powerful. Because we can spend a whole lifetime, without questioning who we are, and sometimes with experiencing a situation where you get this dissonance of saying, well, the reality that I thought the world was, well, there is another reality, that is really different, and just having to experience that. For some people, maybe it's a given, people that have traveled, people have immigrated, for example, have experienced that. Of having two different realities, but for people who were born in some place and have lived their whole life, it's not necessarily something that comes, naturally. So you have to force yourself to live such experience, and I think that this specific experience gave me this awakening that there is value in re-questioning who we are, and then trying to figure out ways to define what we want to be
and to cultivate.
And
to curate our surroundings, to be able to have the soil to cultivate, right?
Yeah, and to, I think also what I realized, that this was an experience that I personally lived, but I saw value in creating spaces where other people could experience that. So that's why through this organization, ICIELA, that I founded after I came back from that first trip to Mali, was to create those spaces where we could, in a safe environment, where people could feel trust, can feel that they won't be judged. Well, to recreate these encounters where we can get people out of their immediate reality or their understanding of the world, and broadening their perspective and creating this little dissonance that I think is really important to be able to want to change and to move in a different direction.
How beautiful. Before I continue with my other questions, everybody and myself are interested in, why did you go to Mali?
Yeah, well, actually, like for many things, I think in life, sometimes it just happens as it has to happen. In case of Mali, I wasn't even supposed to go there. I was on a waiting list of a program. It was called Canada World Youth. It's a program that actually was closed, a few years ago. And it was a really valuable program. I had the privilege to meet its founder, Jacques Hébert. Was actually a friend of my grandfather, so that's how I got to know the program. And this man, Jacques Hébert, who died a few years ago, and actually I was invited to speak to his funeral because I was the youth from the program that was invited to speak, because this program had such a tremendous impact on my life. Because it definitely changed the course of my life for the better, I think. And this man, at some point, I had the privilege to meet him a few times, and actually I did a radio interview with him. And he explained to me that one point in his life he had a dream. And his dream, as he explained to me, was that one day we would close the country. Well, at the time, it wasn't possible. Now we know with COVID it's possible to close a country, but at that time it was it was a fantasy. But he said we could close a country, take everyone we have in the country and ship them outside of the country. Spend 1 year in another place in the world, and then bring back everyone. What do you think it would have as an impact on our people? On the majority group, of people who have maybe traveled a bit, went to, some resorts or some, major touristic destinations, but have not necessarily experienced what it is to really live a different reality and really get out of her daily, routine. He said, what do you think it would make us as a people? So we would be leaders in the world, being open to diversity, to collaborating with other people, It would be, extraordinary. He said, well, it's true we cannot do that for everyone, but at least let's allow all the youth who want to experience that to do it. And that was the essence of Canada World Youth. So I found that this vision was interesting. And with my organization, ICLA, we wanted to recreate a similar context. Ideally, you would want to have people to go elsewhere and to experience firsthand what it is to live a different reality. But with limited resources or time, how can we recreate those spaces here? Because we're a pretty diverse, society here. So how can we build those connections here, so that people can nourish, this community of people coming from different horizons and building a common project as a society by creating those spaces here in Quebec.
How beautiful. And how exciting. Monsieur Hébert was clearly a very wise man with fantastic ideas. And you followed the footsteps. You followed what this youth Canada-wide program was supposed to do. And it brought you to Mali to experience this and bring it back to here. So can you tell us a little more about ICLA and how it's evolved, what it is and how it's evolved since 2002.
Well, actually, it really started as a youth-led organization. We were students, we were doing meetings in the library, at the cafes, and so we really started as a volunteer organization, doing activities in classes, in classrooms, and having kids from different countries corresponding to video, to writing. At some point, we started to have funding. And ultimately, over the years, we got more and more professional. We started to hire people once we got some funding and developed a theory of change that actually is, we think that if we allow individuals to experience these spaces of meeting with people from different realities and broadening our perspectives, these people will become actors of change also. So we started at the individual level. Now we're working more with organizations. So co-constructing inclusion policies in organizations. So we're working more at the systemic level. And I think that by working in that direction, we have an opportunity, I would say, that is quite unique, in Quebec, because we have, even though we have lots of issues with diversity, with the current government, and with all the politics around it, and that is not necessarily all that positive, because there is some people making a lot of political gain in trying to to try to antagonize some parts of the population, which I think is going in the opposite direction of wanting to build a common project. Because there's a really good opportunity here to build a project where everyone can feel a part of. So I think that there's this real potential to do really extraordinary things here in Quebec. For two reasons. There's something that I think we don't value as much, for people who are born here, but we have freedom, we have liberties, we have security, we have stability that can be really ground for experimentation, of trying things, of exploring, for innovations, social innovations that maybe, unfortunately in other parts of the world, it's less, possible for many reasons, and would be more dangerous. People will have more at risk of trying other things. And here, I think we have, on one hand, this stability, but on the other hand, we have the comfort also that comes with it. So there is also not that much of a need of wanting to change things when you've been born in a place that it's not that bad when you compare to the rest of the world, and so you might not necessarily see the need of wanting to change things, which doesn't mean that there are no problems, and this is why I think that wanting to build a common project and wanting to put the finger of what are the things that we want to work on to make this place even better than it is right now. And one thing that I've seen that I worked on for about a decade was improving our democratic system here in Quebec. A lot of people might say, well, you have a good democracy, you're safe, you have freedoms, and it's true. But at the same time, the reason why we have so much difficulty tackling complex problems like climate change, and inclusion in our society, in a diverse society that will become more diverse in the years to come. Because right now we're arguing, is it more 10,000 less or more immigrants per year? There's little debates. In a few years, it's going to be hundreds of thousands of people coming in, and not people that we will choose and they speak French and No, they will be climate refugees, people that we will have no choice to welcome because these people won't have any place to live. So we will have a flood of people coming in, rightfully, because they will have no other places to go. And we as a society will have to adapt to that, for sure. And we don't have a political system that allow that. If we just look at how it works right now, we have, with the Coalition Avenir Québec and François Legault being in power right now, they earned about 40%, roughly 40% of the votes in the last elections, and they got 70% of the seats, which gives them 100% of the power. Like anything that is voted in the National Assembly right now, passes when it comes from the government. Like there's no power to the opposition, and we're in a system that allows that systematically. So we have every election, when you go back in time, there's always been this big difference between the support of the population to the different parties and the actual political weight and power that they get when it comes down to deciding on laws, on things that will have impact on everyone. And this, for me, is really, really important, because when you want to tackle complex issues like inclusion, like climate change, when you have a system like that, it's really difficult, because the government, the party in the power, they just have to rely on the minority of the population to remain in power. And this minority, quite often, in the current case, they don't really want to take much action on climate change. They want to remain their key little comfort, and they don't really want to do that much for inclusion because they want to stay with true Quebecers. And so there's a big issue with the structure that we have and the way that we have the power structured here that I find that is really important to address. The problem is why we don't address it, I believe, is that we have. We don't, I think, as a people, we have, like I said, too much comfort right now with our situation. And we don't have this perception of who we are versus who we want to be. And that, I think, as an individual...
versus who we want to be.
Yeah, and that requires clarity on who we want to be. How
do we know?
Voilà. So like I said, for the individuals, with ICI-là, and we've been working of trying to allow people to pinpoint what they are really, what's their own identity and what they want to become. And I think that when you're able to nail this down, to verbalize that, for individuals or for groups, and it's the same, when you're able to put words and say, well, this is what I want to become, and I realize that this is what I am right now, there's this gap between the two. And I think this is where the magic happens, because when you realize that, this is room for change. This is where you can take action. But for this, you need to have this discussion, this dialogue, this space of interaction where people can discuss on, well, what is it that we really want? And I think that actually in Quebec, we haven't had this opportunity yet to do this conversation, but with the whole population, not just.
Do you think that we've had this conversation on individual levels? Because I think that would be a good start.
Even at an individual level. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. At the individual level, there is very little opportunities that we have or that we take to take the time to just sit back and say, well, what is it that I really want and that I really want to be versus what I am? And this is so precious when we realize that, when we're able to put a finger on that. And so, like you said, yes, at an individual level, I think we need to do it, but also at different levels. And that's why, in my doctorate in law and working on governance, I'm really interested on how as groups, we can come to agree on what are the norms that we can agree and that we can give ourselves. What are the factors that come in play to make this, to allow people to really reveal what is it that they truly want and truly want to become, and to create this, to realize that this space is there for us to grow and to take action. And it's only then, I think, that we can really take action, because if not, we can remain in our position forever. You have people who would remain the same for their whole life. You have societies that will move back and forth for decades, for centuries. And I think it's so important nowadays, because we are facing complex issues that require to take bold actions, to maybe have a chance to resolve them. And that, for me, requires that we have these kinds of discussions. And it happened a few times in Industry of Quebec, where we had this, regional tours of people who organized, like, okay, we're going to have this, il faut qu'on se parle, or things like that. But quite often it was organized by people that ultimately became politicians and then ended up in political parties. And then you have always people wondering, well, is that discussion going to be instrumentalized then later on for political and partisan gains? And so I think there's this need of having these spaces coming from civil society, not from the political parties, but really coming from the society, so that we can have these kinds of conversations, first internally as ourselves, as individuals, but also together to make a sense of who we are as a people, and where do we want to head as a people also.
Thank you for all of that. There's so much that I want to ask about and that I want to explore, because there's so much richness in what you're saying in the opening of the conversation, just on the basic level of individuals, and then bringing that to the societal impact and how that could impact our environment and our political stance and growth. But like, in your experience so far, from ici et là, from your master's and your doctorate and your studies, as well as your work in publishing, how do you see that happening in the society that we have today, which is so individualized, so me, and very closed in a day and age where everything should be more open, but still racism is prevalent and very systemic. And even though we're almost the same skin, but our hair color is different, or I do something different than you do, there seems to be a lot of connection in some cases, in some short cases where, I'm in a yoga environment and I'm thinking of all the healers that I know that are very accepting and whatnot, but in the real society of individuals working day in, day out at the factory or at the school or at the Jean Coutu, how do we bring that awareness within ourselves? How do we open up to the possibility of change when we don't know what change is, and change is very scary for many, very fearful, because it takes you out of your comfort zone and pushes you into a different state. So how do you push that boundary within people for themselves? Or do you see that happen? Is that too much of a big question?
Well, first you mentioned the publishing, maybe for the people who are listening, just to point out we didn't address that, but I also have a business in the publishing industry, an agency that represents publishers and authors internationally for the sale of translation rights. So the purpose and the link I would make with this business is really to allow the travel of literature, of publishing content from here to other countries, to exchange, because literature is also a big cultural vector. So that's also a way to promote these exchanges and to better understand each other. But to go back to your question, yes, I think I don't think we can expect realistically, a lot of change in our own generations. I think it's something that will go maybe beyond our lifetime also. It's work over several generations. I've seen a lot of change, even with the youth that we work with, in terms of, openness, in terms of curiosity, of wanting to understand things that maybe just a few generations back, we didn't have that. It was really centered on for some people, of our own existence, of our own, comfort. And so we're seeing more, I think, curiosity, more awareness of mental health and mental wellness issues. And I like also the mental wellness, because it's not just in reaction, but it's also how can we prevent? How can we create spaces that for us, to maintain the mental wellness? And I've seen that with students that I've been with and youth that I work with, and that they have really they're really cautious about that. And I see this as being positive, because, being more aware of ourselves, as you said a bit earlier, is a really important step, of being well with ourselves. And I think that we see in the current young generation more awareness about that. And I'm confident that at some point, being more cautious about ourselves will bring us to pay more attention to what is it that impacts everyone. What are the overarching issues? What are the greater scheme of things? What are these issues? And the climate is one. Inclusion is one. How can we live together? In a way that everyone can fulfill their potential, so that as a society, as a whole, we succeed all together. And I think this is a way of thinking that I don't think we can impose it. I don't think we can push this. I think it will come from this awareness that our own wellness also comes from the wellness of others. We cannot just rely on our own wellness. But that, I think, will take maybe one or two more generations to get there. And the big issue is that climate change will catch up with us, because this is right now. So this is my concern, is that we're running out of time. It's not, if we had more time, we can wait for several generations for this to happen. So there is this need of taking action, I think now. So we need to provoke a bit the thing. So for me, I think trying to work on, like my researches are on how to bring these decision making, these exchanges at more local level, how to to discuss on how we want to govern ourselves and create norm amongst ourselves at some local level. Is it on environmental issues, on social issues, but at the local level, in communities, in groups, in organizations? I think this is a level where it is manageable. We can do something. We can have an impact. People can feel the impact and experience it, can see the value in having these spaces where we learn from each other, when we share and when we decide together. I think that by experiencing it as much as I experienced my first trip in Mali, to experience situations where we get out of our comfort zone and we put the finger on what we want to become, either personally or as a group, compared to where we are, and experiencing this discomfort and that zone in between. If we can experience it at a local level, in some group managing the decisions at a local level, then I think can build trust that we can do it at other levels. So that's my way of approaching things, and trying to tackle this broader issues before without having to wait for several generations, because that might be a little bit long.
Right. And I noticed that the environmental impact that's going on right now with all the floods and all the burnings and the fires and these incredible seas that are happening around the world, I guess you seem to be very attentive to that and very empowered by bringing that awareness to people, from people's individuation and identity to people's environment, right?
Yep.
How did you get into that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting what you're saying, because actually I went 2 weeks ago to an exhibition at the National Film Board here in Montreal. It's actually a friend of mine, Sandra Rodriguez, who was working at the MIT and actually came up with an exhibition of an AI, an artificial intelligence model based on Noam Chomsky, the famous linguist, philosopher, thinker, and she actually took all what has been produced on him, either recordings, conferences, and stuff, and built an AI model. So you can interact with this model in virtual reality. You can ask questions and then get responses as if you were talking with Noam Chomsky. And she says that it's probably one of the first models of digitizing a human being, actually, which is kind of immortalizing this person. Incredible. Because forever you will be able to communicate, exchange, ask questions, and get answers based on what this person has said previously. And one of my questions was, based on what you said, when we look at the climate change, the climate crisis, some people would say, that is already beyond what the worst scenarios were predicting. We're already beyond that. Now, scientists don't know anymore what to say, because they're like, man, what we see is worse. It's like when you look at sci-fi movies and you look at reality, and like, well, reality is worse than what the fiction is. So the fiction can't catch up. So we're in that situation right now. So it can be really preoccupying. So I was asking the model, what is the meaning of our existence as humans, in this area, in this age where we're facing these big changes that will affect us all, And the answer that he came with, saying, well, we have as humans this unique capacity of learning and collaborating and figuring out together how to resolve situations. We have this. We have this capacity. Do we have the trust and the confidence in ourselves enough to use it at its full potential? Because this is something we have. We have the capacity. We have the brains. We have the collectivity. We have all these brains around the world, all these people that if we do something together, we have a tremendous power. But do we have this trust in each other that we can do things together and we can change things together? I think that it comes down to this. How can we personally see our capacity to change things, but also collectively. And I think that this is where there's this silver lining of building this capacity of putting the finger of where collectively we want to go. And I think this is where my energies will focus in the next years for sure. But I'm confident. I think we have a potential. We have all what is needed to be able to tackle these situations. But it's more of, do we see the possibility that we can together do things and not just being alone in our own corner and looking at the situation happening in front of us as a spectator, which that wouldn't be the best scenario for me.
Right, as an individual rather than as a whole, as a group, as a society. I love that because it really brings that intertwining of the individual inner work into coming and working through those spaces, those uncomfortable spaces and places towards those conversations that are pushing our edges to explore something new, not only the more grand scheme of things, to be able to have those conversations and to put our brains to build something bigger, to adapt, right?
And something really important you just mentioned, the discomfort that I think is needed for change to happen. And we're in a society, like I said at the beginning, that we have so much distractions that are out there to keep the comfort. We come back home, we have open the TV, there's these daily TV shows, and then you put on the radio and there's this kind of always the same routine of the same songs playing almost in the same order, and everything is set up so that we can see life as being a routine, so that we can be comforted, and we try to stabilize things in our life, but nothing is stable. Nothing will ever be stable.
And I don't think I find very much comfort in doing the same thing always, all the time, the same way, or hearing the same song that's becoming annoying, although it was a great song, and now I'm listening to it 1,000 times in an hour on the radio, which I don't even listen to anymore. But it's really interesting how we've allowed ourselves to adapt to this type of lifestyle that has been instilled towards us. You go to work 9 to 5, you come home, you make supper, you watch TV, you tuck your kids to bed, and you make the lunches, and let's go, and this is life. Yep. But is it?
Yeah, and I've had a job a few weeks ago. I was working at some place, and I had to take the car and travel there. It was the other side of the island of Montreal, and I was stuck in traffic, in the streets. And oh my gosh, I experienced what it is to be anxious in traffic. And I understand why on the radio they would put, humor shows and people, tell jokes and blah, blah. Because you need to numb your mind when you're in traffic if you don't want to get crazy, But listening to those radio shows that always tell jokes, I think takes you away from realizing that, well, that's crazy. We're in this traffic, and the cars being stopped, one behind the other, all the pollution, all the anxiety, all the heat, and we're trying to walk away from this discomfort by having, these radio shows, this music we're putting in, and these cars that are becoming more and more comfortable, the SUVs that become more and more a second home for some people.
Absolutely.
Some people, and I've seen some people just getting out of their house, in their car, just driving around because they would feel more comfortable sitting in their cars, with the AC, with the radio, with the stereo stuff. And so it becomes a source of comfort, but it's the source of the problem. And, so it's interesting how we are normalizing those ways to cope, with the reasons of the problems we're experiencing. And I think what we should rather do is normalizing the discomfort.
Yes.
If we can realize that it is part of living and addressing the issues we're having, to feel discomfort and to pay attention to this discomfort, and to make us reflect on, I'm experiencing something. I have a discomfort. what is the cause of that? And instead of trying to find a way to cope with it and to push it on the side, saying, what can I do about the source of the discomfort? This is where we can take action.
Or what can I do to live up to this challenge that is coming to confront me, that I'm not used to confronting myself about. How can I change that so that the mind of one person can shift after one simple conversation if they're curious enough to actually go where the unsaid is, where the unexplored is, where the unexpressed is. And my God, do we all have so much unexpressed and unsaid thoughts, emotions, ideas, experiences that can be so nourishing and resourcing to so many others by relating to it, just by knowing that we're not alone. So yeah, absolutely. And how can we maybe even cultivate more of that desire to go towards the uncomfortable conversation or the unsaid or the situations that are unfamiliar to us, to manage our expectations, not only of our others, but of ourselves in those moments? And how can we become better people by being more authentic to what we actually feel, think, and say, so that our words match the value of the word?
Yeah. And there's this concept of the authentic conversation or courageous conversation. There are different ways of approaching it, but I think that there's something cultural about it. I think in Quebec more specifically, I think we're more of a consensus, culture, and people try to avoid getting into conflict or to addressing conflict. In other cultures, maybe people are more accustomed to talk things, more directly, more frank, and definitely I think it can have a great impact. So I think here in Quebec, we have this that I think has to be addressed possibly in the education system, but to address this the authenticity, the courageous of raising concerns, and that it's okay to create discomfort. Doesn't mean it has to be disrespectful.
No, absolutely not.
Two different things. So you can raise concerns about what you're feeling. I mean, that's a proper way to do it. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to attack someone and say, well, someone else is the reason of my discomfort. But to expressing discomfort is definitely legitimate. And how do we cope with that? How do we accept this sharing and realize that it has a value and that not sharing it is also detrimental to both individual and the group. So I think there's some work to do around creating these spaces, like I used to say, that where we want to go and where we are at with this discomfort, but also in situations where there are tensions, where the discomfort is something that has an importance and actually is a key ingredient in wanting to move forward, in wanting to change, in giving a driving force.
And evolve to something different, something not necessarily better or worse, but something different that can maybe open up new possibilities, new ideas. What do you think of the word trust following what you just said? Can that be something that we can build within our societies, within our individual being? And how can we do that to create this opening so that people can have better conversations and better interactions in those uncomfortable situations?
Yeah. Well, I think there's something really beautiful about life, and that is that nothing is static. Everything moves, everything changes, And I think there's a big part of us that want to reframe that we don't want to go, we would prefer things to stay the same at some point. And I think this capacity to embrace that things are evolving, that things are organic, that nature, life is always changing, it requires trust in ourselves, that we're capable of facing these changes. We're organic beings. Life is changing. We are changing, and that is okay. So trusting our own capacity, but trusting the others also. That the others are going through not the exact same journey. We all have our journeys.
Thankfully,
yeah. But we're living on the same world, on the same planet. And so we have commonalities. We have common grounds. And I think that the important is to pinpoint those common grounds and trusting that we're able to find this. And you would be surprised. Sometimes I would go to mediation, sessions and working with groups that, sometimes it would be citizens and would be elected officials. It would be companies. It would be civil society groups around the table, and people with really different interests, and values sometimes. And the challenge is to bring it down to what is our common ground here and what is the key issue that we all agree on, and that we realize that we are all on it together and that we can trust each other, that we're in this together and that we want to move forward together. And I think that really finding this common ground is the key challenge.
Cooperation versus competition.
Well, yeah, because with competition, we won't achieve anything. We might achieve something for some people, but not that. That's a really nice link to we can make a relation with what I was talking about, political system and democracy in general. Do we value a system where there's one class of people who are ruling? This is our current system right now. This is a system where there's one group ruling and the others follow. Or do we prefer a system where we are collaborating because we are tackling the same problems. We're tackling the same issues that are affecting everyone. How can we together find solutions to that? It might take more time. It might take more discussion. Mm-hmm. Maybe it might be hurtful. It might be painful for some people through, having this discussion, going through this discomfort zone. And yes, up to some extent, we might lose some people in the process. Yeah, sometimes it can go to that extent. But as a people, as a society, I think we have much more to gain in working together. So I think that for this to happen, for sure, we need to come to this common understanding, which requires much more work, working on this. But like you mentioned, for the trust, I think that having trust in ourselves, in our capacity to be this organic being in an ever-changing world, and trusting that others are also in this same ever-changing world, and that even if we think we're really different, we're still, in this same world where we have something in common that is facing the adversity of this world that we don't know how things will go on, how things will evolve. But there is one thing that we're sure of, is that we have to come up with solution that we all work together on it, because if not, none of us will succeed and we'll all hit the wall. So it's all together or nothing at some point, when we're looking at these complex situations. So hopefully, I hope that we as a people and humans will come to this conclusion that our personal interest realize somehow in our collective interest. And if it's not now, well, I hopefully in the generations to come, but I'm confident that this will happen.
So as we're coming to the end of the podcast, I'd like to ask you two more really important questions that were brought up as you were talking. There's this talk that we've been having about discomfort and challenge and change. Mm-hmm. However, we haven't really explored what is it that we need to bring forth or learn or get curious about if we want to be able to learn how to have these uncomfortable conversations or discuss these confronting situations or have these challenging interactions or what is it that we need to learn as a society to go forth in creating this ideal world of acceptance and evolution of whatever it may be. Mm-hmm.
Well, some people might call it emotional intelligence or emotional awareness. I think that we need to be more aware of what is happening in our body when we're going through these discomfort episodes, and acknowledging that, being able to say, what is that? Because if we don't take the time to acknowledge it, when we will feel it, we will want to push away. We want to walk back. We won't want to experience that. As soon as we start to feel it, we're like, I don't want to go there. It's discomfort. But if we can acknowledge that, I'm feeling, why am I feeling that? Why?
And perhaps not falling back onto the same old addictions that we have, whether it's eating or shopping or drinking or, over-exercise or overachievement or taking another class or whatever it may be that, all these listeners are doing or that we're doing on our our time. So not falling in those habitual patterns of comfort every time that discomfort comes up, and actually trusting the process of what the body is saying is what you're saying. I love that. And as a body practitioner, I totally, completely, 200% commit to that, because really the body is actually telling us so much more than we give it credit for. And very often I, as a therapist, realize how disconnected people are with not only their bodies, but their sensations, their emotions, and their true feelings and thoughts about any one topic, right? That expression comes, that trust that we want to have within ourselves comes with the expression of what we feel inside, whether it's writing, whether it's sharing it with someone, or physically getting it out of our system. So it's like if this anger that we feel is not valid, and you shouldn't feel angry because it's bad, but that's not true. Actually, that anger is so powerful and very often a catalyst to the creation of new ideas and exploring new pathways. So that anger, that sadness, that grief, that pain, that hurt, or that joy, or that connection, or that thing that really, really resonated and that made you feel nice and warm and fuzzy. All of these are great indicators to how we can build more trust within ourselves and our bodies and our beliefs and our thoughts, and our conversations can have an impact if we allow that trust. And perhaps those conversations gone on a bigger scale can have environmental impacts and political changes that can hopefully guide us to a better tomorrow or a better meanwhile until tomorrow comes.
And you mentioned the curiosity also, to have the curiosity to explore, when you're feeling these emotions, how to use it as a leverage. And instead of, like you said, going to old patterns, how to use that in the same. Sometimes, and that's interesting. A friend of mine was saying, sometimes the same way that the body will react when you have a fear, for example, could be similar to when you enjoy something. The body will go through that excitement. So how to rewire a bit, saying, well, I feel that. How can I shift that and channel this feeling that I'm having and turn it into something that will bring me to be curious about what I can do about this feeling, and instead of going to the patterns. So definitely this could be something to explore for sure.
Fantastic. And as a close, what would you say you are working on for yourself to create that trust, to show up fully in every one of your interactions?
I think I allow myself more to disclose to people, to share how I'm feeling. And this is something that is risky, because you never know how people will react. And quite often people are a little bit feel discomfort when they receive how someone is feeling in a moment.
Or how they don't receive sometimes, because they're not familiar on how to receive somebody else's feedback.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think this is part of the militant action we can take on is in the world we live in, to be more, to share more in the world, and just take this little leap of faith in sharing more about our feelings with people, and see how this can have an impact, and how can people sometimes can be, this person shared a bit more than I'm used to. that's weird, but let me think about it. And I'm sure that some people will say, well, that's interesting because it created some discomfort that can lead to something. Now I've learned a little bit more about that person, about this person's view of the world, by sharing how the person was feeling. And by having this mutual disclosure, I think that by disclosing, we allow other people to build that trust that they were talking about. And I think this is definitely something we need more in the world, the trust in ourselves. So trying this more and more and building trust with others by doing it, by sharing. And this is something I think we can all do individually, gradually, maybe not tomorrow start to tell to everyone how you feel about everything. But to start, a little bit more
learn the
gradually,
discernment of knowing when and where and
not
how
everywhere
to
and everywhere.
push our boundaries.
But to push a little bit more this boundary and disclosing a little bit more. I think that more and more, the more we do that, I think it can have an impact and at least touch a few other people, and these other people will start to do it. And this, I think, can have some trigger effect. And I think we need to not underestimate, little actions that we can do.
Power of a drop that creates a ripple effect in waves that carry forward throughout the world, right?
Yeah, it can be really powerful. And actually, I would say maybe it's what is the most powerful, is to have this ripple effect.
I love that. Is there anything that you would like to share with the listeners before we move on? Tips, wisdom, something that's on your heart, something that you would like to shout out off the Montreal's rooftops, or just something that you really hold close and that you really want everybody to be reminded of, something that's important for you.
Well, I think that, to remember that we are really, really privileged in the world that we live in, even though it's not a perfect world, for sure. And there is a lot of things that, and I'm saying that coming from a privileged position, I'm white, cis man, and I know and I'm aware that, there are so many things that are happening here that I will never experience in my whole lifetime, and that people experience on a daily basis, microaggressions and things like that. But even though I think that we live in such a privileged position to be in this place in the world, right, in this time, and I really encourage us to be aware of that and to consider this as just a piece of wisdom, saying we have this opportunity, and how can we grow through this opportunity? How can it make us consider our life in a way that is more appreciative of what we are and what we have and what we do. Not necessarily to have more pressure on us and put pressure of doing things, but just acknowledging that, we are in this place and time in a really privileged position. And I think this, just being aware of that by itself is a lot, but I think it can open a lot of opportunities when we acknowledge it. And
what I hear from that is increasing awareness can really have a ripple effect on our gratitude towards life. And when we step forward with that gratitude, things change. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think there's so much more that I want to talk about, but unfortunately, we are out of time, and you have things and I have things, and you probably have things out there wherever you are, whether you're driving or taking a walk or doing laundry, whatever you're doing. I hope you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening. Make sure you take a moment to take 3 deep breaths throughout your day at some point, and perhaps many more times after that, and come back to your awareness of the blessings of your life. I wish you a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening. See you later.